future. There are no people in the future. No people at all. There are no people in the future. Where did all my people go? There are no people in the future. Let me try my people call. Where are all my people? Where are all my people? I guess I'll fly away now.
Hey, everybody, welcome. It is Monday, May 30th, 2022. Welcome to Raging Chickens, Out to Coop Live. Yes, it is Memorial Day, and we'd like to take a moment to remember those who have died in wars and those who have worked to stop unnecessary deaths as the result of unjust wars. This is Kevin Mahoney, creator and founder of Raging Chicken. On Out to Coop Live, we talk to progressives, activists, and troublemakers of all sorts, right from our own backyards from across the country. You can join us at the end of the week, of course, for our Friday Politics Roundup, where we break down the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. You can also check out our once or twice monthly The Wednesday Show with Cyril Michaleko. Cyril, of course, is the editor-in-chief of the Bucks County Beacon, and he joins me to drill down to the Bucks County, Pennsylvania, and international politics. We go all over the place. You can get all our shows by subscribing to our podcast on Podbean, iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Make sure you leave us that 5-star review and let other people know why you like the show. That helps other people find the show. It's kind of a cool thing, right? A little review, other people find the show. It's awesome. You can support the show by becoming a patron for as little as $5 a month. Head on over to patreon.com/rcpress. You can choose your membership level, $5, $10, $25 a month, like you make the call. You can also help out the show by heading over to our YouTube channel. If you're not there already, smash that subscribe button, like the stream for this show, and hit that notification bell so you know every time we go live. And look, we hit a milestone this weekend, everybody. We are now over 200 subscribers on our channel, which I'm so thrilled about. I know we don't have the hundreds of thousands of subscribers that you get at a lot of these folks, but this has been a goal. You've heard me talk about it before. I was so thrilled to see that we cracked 200 and went to 201 right before the show today. So seriously, subscribe to the show. Even if you're not on YouTube all the time, you subscribe to the show. That helps other people find the show and helps build our audience and helps kind of amplify the voices of people doing the awesome work right here in Bucks County, in Pennsylvania, and across the country. You can also join our Discord server. Info on that is in tonight's show notes. And look, if you look for more PA progressive talk, tune into the Rick Smith Show's live stream at 9 p.m. Eastern on his YouTube channel, Twitter, Facebook, wherever you get your podcasts. You can find him there too as well. Check out the ricksmithshow.com for the latest across all his platforms. And you absolutely have to check out the Sisters of the Night Caucus podcast if you haven't already. The amazing PA women stirring the political cauldron behind this podcast rock the house. And they know where the bodies are buried. Yes, make sure to follow them on Twitter at The Night Caucus. That's at The Night Caucus on Twitter. Subscribe to their podcast on Anchor, Spotify, iTunes, or wherever you get your podcasts. Hey, all you gamers out there, listen up. Check out The Game In. That's a Game In with 2 N's. They are a Quakertown-based black family-owned gaming store. They're friends of the show. They've got everything for Retro N64s, the latest consoles, video games for all platforms, loads of collectibles, action figures, Funko Pops, walls of Funko Pops. And kids get discounts at every A. Look, they get the A's at a report card. This is the last report card marking period's coming up. Head on over to The Game In and check them out. You can check them out on their Facebook page. Follow them on Twitter at The Game In. Got a question about a game, look for something hard to get, shoot them an email or shoot them an email at thegameinpa@gmail.com. Special shout out goes to Jonathan Mann, who wrote our intro song, There Are No People in the Future. Check out all his great stuff on his YouTube page and follow him on Twitter at SongADayMan. That's at SongADayMan on Twitter. And hey, look, do not let Paul Martino and his ilk buy our schools and our community. Help us end the domination of right-wing money tipping the scales to the extreme on our school boards and our community. Look, we've teamed up with levelfield.net to make this easy for a community-run PAC that is going directly into movement building and candidates that are kind of meet the values that we have in the progressive community. You can check out information about the Raging Chicken Community Fund at ragingchicken.levelfield.net. Well, everybody, Welcome to the end of May, almost, practically. And tonight, got a special treat once again to close this month out. I welcome Kierstyn Zolfo back to the show. Kierstyn, of course, is the PA Indivisible Legislative Chair and Bucks County awesome person, right?
Thank you.
Yes, you got it. We'll be ripping the moderate mask off Representative Brian Fitzpatrick by digging into his anti-abortion record, his election integrity gaslighting, his use of alternative facts. We're going to take a look at what he just did on the domestic terrorism bill. Can you say Janice face anybody? I can. Right, and if we have time, we might even kind of dip into what's going on with his little relationship with the ballot harvester down there in Philly. At the very least, we're going to kind of point you over to Kierstyn's article over at Bucks County Beacon so you can check all that out. Look, that's not enough? Hey, maybe we'll add in a surprise about his visit to Ukraine while still refusing to hold town halls for his constituents right here in the PA01, right? So it's all pretty much crazy. But look, maybe we'll just talk about why re-electing Brian Fitzpatrick this fall will bolster Republicans' efforts to repeal many of the games of the 20th century. Crazy, crazy. Kierstyn, welcome back to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciated that intro. And I have to say, you really did get to the crux of it, which is a vote for Brian Fitzpatrick is a vote to put Republicans in control of Congress. Like, that's the top line of everything that we're going to discuss.
Well, and isn't that exactly the mentality and the mindset that we all need to be in right now? Is like, it's all about, look, even let's just say you got some person, and I don't know who this could be, but some person who has a good feeling about kind of Brian Fitzpatrick because they met him once and he was kind to them, right? Okay, I'll give you that. I'm not saying that you have to hate the guy. All I'm saying to you right now, what is at stake is like issue after issue, and that has everything to do with the control of Congress. So even if you are a person who thinks that Brian Fitzpatrick is, he's okay, right? I'll tell you right now, a vote for Fitzpatrick is a vote to, like I said, a vote to repeal much of the gains of the 20th century. So,
exactly.
I mean, and look, we've had it's almost like, it's almost like cliche now that Brian Fitzpatrick, right, and there's a Fitzpatrick PR machine, which is all geared up to kind of make him seem like the most moderate and the kind of most even-handed and kind of thoughtful person that's out there, when really his record is anything but. And I think that, just this past month has really laid the groundwork where we can see exactly how this moderate mask that he wears is just a load of nonsense, and that we have to have a different kind of approach. So why don't we start? Let's take a look at this because, I mean, God, earlier this month, I think it was, right? We saw the draft SCOTUS bill, Supreme Court bill, that is kind of designed to repeal Roe v. Wade. And if there's not something that is kind of more fundamental, right, to kind of women being like on the same level of citizenship as everyone else.
Having bodily autonomy?
Right,
yeah.
Exactly. This is what we're talking about, right? Yeah. So let's talk about kind of moderate Fitzpatrick when it comes to his stance on kind of the right to abortion and protection of women's reproductive freedom.
So the way I describe it is Brian Fitzpatrick is not just anti-choice, he is virulently anti-choice. He has never done anything remotely moderate when it comes to women's reproductive freedom. So if we go back to 2017, his first year in Congress, he voted for the no taxpayer funding for abortion bill. That's basically, it was codifying the old Hyde Amendment, that little rider that they throw into budgets that says that no federal funding can go towards abortion services. Right. So that already went into every budget, but the Republicans in the 115th Congress under Paul Ryan felt that it was important to pass a bill that said that too. So he voted yes on that. And then he voted for a budget that would have defunded Planned Parenthood if it had passed as they had initially created it, but he voted yes for that. And he voted for a 20-week abortion ban. And that was October 2017. So in his first year in office, he showed us exactly who he is. And that's not the least of it. I mean, he has also voted yes on a bill that granted legal rights to fetuses. And he's participated not just in votes for the quote unquote Born Alive Abortion Survivor Protection Act. That's quite a mouthful. What it basically, that bill says that it takes something that's already illegal, which would be killing an infant. Like we already have laws on that, but this would codify into law an extra time saying that that's illegal still, I guess. It's also basically a right-wing urban legend. Like when I'm trying to remember is it Gutenmacher Institute? I'm sorry if I'm getting that name wrong, but the group that really does a lot of research on reproductive freedoms. They've basically found that this never happens. There is almost never an abortion that occurs with an infant that comes out as a living creature. That's not how abortions work. But despite that, it's something that the right wing uses to drive their supporters into frenzies. And so they feel that they need to pass this bill. But he didn't just do that. In the 2 terms of Congress since then, when Democrats have been in control, obviously a bill like that isn't going to come to the floor under Nancy Pelosi because she's Nancy Pelosi and she supports women's reproductive freedoms. Excuse me, anyone who can bear children's reproductive freedoms. I'm sorry, I'm trying to be better about my language on this issue. But basically what he has done is he's done these discharge petitions. It's like a Republican show of force where they all come up and they sign this bill. Because if they can get 218 signatures, they can bring a bill to the floor. Well, they're not getting 218 signatures because they're not in the majority. But still, in 2019 and in 2021, he participated in this, it's basically just a messaging effort. So he's done that. Just last year, he voted no on the Women's Health Protection Act, the bill that just recently, unfortunately, failed in Congress, in the Senate, because it couldn't get past a Republican filibuster. And he also supports crisis pregnancy centers. Those are those fake, if you were to Google abortions, you wouldn't actually get real abortion service providers. Like the first 10 responses are going to be these fake crisis pregnancy centers where their whole job is to try to divert you away from abortion services.
Yeah, I remember. It's funny when I first came out, when I first started teaching at Kutztown, right in the Kutztown. I think it's in the borough. I don't know if it's still there or not. But there was
Kevin. I have to say, you're kind of cutting in and out a little bit. I know it's. I shouldn't show us behind the scenes stuff, but I can't hear you very well right now.
Okay. Okay, go ahead with what you were saying then. I'll come back. I'm not sure what the issue is, but go ahead, Kierstyn.
Okay. Yeah, I'm sorry. So the crisis pregnancy centers, he's basically done fundraisers at those events, and he has done tweeted out pictures from events that he's done with crisis pregnancy centers, and they are the exact opposite of what is needed when a person has to face a choice about whether or not they're going to carry a pregnancy to term. So it's not just that he is anti-choice with his votes, he is anti-choice with his every action.
Oh man, are you hearing me coming through now?
I am, and I can see you too. So we're back. Okay,
excellent.
Sorry about that.
Sure. Yeah, it was odd because I was hearing you fine, and I was seeing my video. I'm not sure what happened. It must have been in my upload side. My apologies.
No, it's all good.
What I was just starting.
So in any event.
No, what I was starting to say. Yeah, what I was starting to say was I remember when you mentioned those crisis pregnancy those places. Remember when I first started teaching at Kutztown, I remember seeing one of those in town. I was like, oh, this is a good thing, thinking naively, right? And then I happened to come up in a conversation with somebody. I said, oh, and I saw, well, that's kind of seems to be like a relatively progressive thing. And they're like, oh, no, it was one of these places. So, I mean, in that kind of record, we're seeing, this guy, like you said, it's not just that he's voted here and there for this, but he's voted for extreme bills, right? And the most extreme right-wing kind of talking points and theories and kind of agenda points. Fitzpatrick has been there right from his first days in office.
I would agree. And what I would also point out too, and the reason why I brought up those discharge petitions that he participated in 2019 and 2021 on that Born Alive bill, is that a lawmaker has to take votes. I mean, yeah, it's possible for them to vote present, but realistically, he has to take votes. He didn't have to take part in those discharge petitions. He chose to do that. He chose to be a part of that process that it was just a media marketing to the far right anti-choice crowd, and he was part of it. He chose to. So it's you cannot say that any single thing he has done there is moderate.
Right.
He is very clearly to the far, far right of the spectrum on this, especially when I remember doing research before I did the piece for the Bucks County Beacon to see what the rate of acceptance among the general public was. Because, when you stay in sort of a left-wing bubble, which I'll admit to the fact that I mostly stay there, I wasn't really sure. But it basically came down to, in the Philadelphia area, it's about 80% of voters who were surveyed had said that they believe in few to no restrictions on abortion.
Yeah.
80%.
I mean, it's 80%. And I think that this is the kind of thing where we need to be, this is me editorializing here, but from my perspective is that this is something that that progressives and those folks are kind of on the broad kind of left of the spectrum, or people who give half a crap about women's reproductive freedom, need to stop being afraid to campaign on this stuff. If you're talking about an issue that has 80% support in your region, then we need to have kind of a full-throated endorsement of kind of abortion rights here, right?
And can I just say, that's why I kind of love Ashley Ehasz right now, because she had no problem taking the mic and talking about reproductive freedom at the various events that have taken place since the leak of the Supreme Court decision. She has been out front and just very strong on her defense of reproductive freedom.
100%. And this is not an exact quote, but I mean, the fact that she got up there and she said, look, if, God help me that I'm going to go out and risk my life for this country and come back here to be a second-class citizen. No, Brian Fitzpatrick, we're coming for your seat, right? And I think, that kind of clear, like I said, full-throated kind of campaign message that it's I'm not just going to kind of say well, I want to make sure preserve women's access to health care. No. I mean, we're not going to use the coded language anymore. We're going to talk about exactly what we mean. And she's been doing it. So, hats off to her. I mean, hats off to her and her campaign. I think she's been doing an outstanding job.
Agreed. And I'd also like to add, that's one of the reasons why I've been avoiding the term pro-choice as much as I can. Again, it's retraining because, I came up in the 90s and, it was all pro-choice, but really it's reproductive freedom. We need to talk about it's abortion rights. We have to say precisely what it is that we're talking about here, because you know what? Abortion isn't shameful. It's a healthcare decision. And we just need to own up to that. And do you mind if I actually, I was going to see if I could find the exact quote that Ashley had, because it was really great. Okay, here it is. This is a quote from her on May 15th. Quote, "I did not see combat overseas to come back home, have my reproductive rights taken away, and be made a second-class citizen for the country I risked my life to protect. I have one thing to say to my opponent, Brian Fitzpatrick. I'm coming for your seat, and I will win." Unquote, Ashley Ehasz, Democratic candidate for Congress, BA 01. I mean, she just laid it all out there, and it was gorgeous.
No, and thank God. And I've been waiting for a long time for a candidate to come out with this kind of message. And I've said this on my show multiple times. I said, we finally got a candidate in Bucks County running against Brian Fitzpatrick that is a good candidate despite the DCCC, despite the kind of consultant class folks that go out and try to handpick candidates based upon some algorithm, right? I mean, despite all of that, we still got a fantastic candidate. And that, I was talking to somebody earlier about this today and saying, look, she's showed up unlike any other candidate that we've had up against Fitzpatrick. She's been out there, she's been knocking doors, been showing up for rallies, been showing up for other candidates, and she has not walked away from the kind of very kind of aggressive campaign launch video that she started her campaign with. And so again, hats off to her. Thank God that we've got someone running like her. So,
she is walking the walk. She is not just talking the talk. And I would like to add one other postscript to it. I know today we're talking about Fitzpatrick, but I feel like I have to bring this up. Yep. This SCOTUS leak had one other big benefit to those of us here in Pennsylvania, and it's really Senator Bob Casey came over to our side finally.
Yep.
There's something to be said about that. For so long, they talked about there being two pro-life Republicans and, two pro-life Democrats in the Senate, and Bob Casey was one of them. And it was one of those things where people would ask me, why do you love Bob Casey so much? He's not one of our allies on this. And I'm like, well, he's 95% of the way with us on other things. It's just wonderful that of all of the things to come out of this horrible, horrible SCOTUS leak.
Yeah.
The one good one was Bob Casey coming out and saying, like, yeah, I have to side with my constituents.
100%. And I have to say, as part of the language retraining that we're all going through, right, I'm also, I'm choosing the forced birther instead of pro-life, right?
Yeah, I like that. I need to, I've been saying anti-choice, but you're right, forced birth.
I'm going to forced birther because that's a, let them make their, let them kind of get all upset about the term and explain themselves away. That's how I look at it, so.
I'm loving it, and I need to use it more.
I know, like you, I came up in the 90s, doing exactly the same stuff, but I think that we need the more aggressive language now that's really puts a sharp focus on what we're talking about. Yep. So speaking of this, now, one of the other things that we see this week, past couple of weeks now, has been marked by absolutely horrific kind of gun violence, mass shootings, both we saw in Buffalo and now what we saw in Uvalde, which is like absolutely horrifying. Before we even get to the absolute complete mishandling of everything that took place on the policing, the fact is that this was two AR-15s were bought by an 18-year-old like on his birthday so he could go and commit this murder, these murders, right? These absolute massacres. And we saw the same thing happen in Buffalo, where we got one of these right wings, like white supremacists, head out to Buffalo, look for kind of a black area where you could go to a supermarket and kind of massacre as many black people as he can while he live streamed it. And so once again, it's this nationwide ritual that we're going through, and I think there's people once again are trying to break us out of that cycle and say we need to kind of like action on this immediately. So let's take a little bit of a look at Brian Fitzpatrick's kind of like where he is on guns, and then I want to move that into what just happened on this domestic terrorism bill following the Buffalo shootings. But first, because he's got kind of a mixed record, right? This is one of the things he tries to hold up as one of these moderate stances. So can you walk us through that a little bit?
Definitely. And I mean, if you were to take, we talked about his PR machine earlier on. If you were to take their angle on it, he would look like, oh, he's the most progressive person on gun rights. They really do put that forward because that's what gets him endorsements from gun reform groups. And he does get those endorsements. But the fact is his record is mixed. So on the pro side, he has sponsored himself some bills that have to do with school safety related to guns. And at least one of them passed in 2018. And he has voted for the background check bills that the Democrats have put forth. One of the few Republicans who's done so. There were a couple, but he is one of the few, and he should be commended for that. Mm-hmm. But the fact is everyone knows that those are DOA bills. They're not going anywhere. There is not the support in the Senate for those to be passed. So while we do give him credit for having placed those votes, it's not the same credit as placing a vote for a bill that is going to make it into law, because he knows they're not. We do have to look, though, at his history of placing bad gun votes, and he has done some. So this one's a little bit technical. I'm going to ask you to follow me as I get a little bit nerdy on it. But
I'm here. Whenever
Congress changes hands from one party to another, particularly when it does it in concert with the presidency changing hands from one party to the other, much as it did with the Obama to Trump changeover, there's something called the Congressional Review Act that lets Congress look at rules that bureaucratic agencies have put into effect and say, no, we didn't intend that, and we're going to reverse that rule because we didn't intend for that to happen when we gave you your authorities. So one of those things that happened at the very start of the 115th Congress, when Republicans were in control under Paul Ryan, was something that's called, it was a Congressional Review Act, and it was called HJ Res 40, so that's House Joint Resolution 40. And it looked at an Obama-era rule that said that folks who receive disability benefits for certain mental health issues, and they're ones where their cases are so severe that they need to be assigned a person to handle their finances for them. So we're not just saying anyone who's on disability for mental issues, but they can't handle their own day-to-day expenses, that they should be blocked from passing background checks. Now, my day-to-day work has to deal with working with Social Security disability benefits. So I can assure you, we're not talking about the vast majority of people who get those benefits. We're talking about a very small proportion of them have to get what's called a rep payee. Fitz voted to get rid of that rule, along with most of the other Republicans in the House. And what that means, and I believe this was enacted into law. What that means is all of their talk about, oh, this is a mental health problem and it needs to be treated as a mental health issue. Well, all of them who were in Congress in 2017 voted to take people who have mental health issues and give them guns.
Right.
If they want them.
This was
that they would no longer, not pass the background checks.
100%. And so let's be clear, there was a rule in place already that said, look, if a person has such severe mental health issues, right, that they can't handle, like you said, handle their own finances and so on, that we want to make sure that a gun doesn't end up in that person's hand because they are not capable of kind of using it safely in this kind of way. You just don't know. So there was already the rule, and that this vote, what it did was took that rule away and said, no, they should be able to get whatever firearm that they want.
Exactly. And there was another bill along those same lines. It was called the Veterans Second Amendment Protection Act, also in 2017. It was HR 1181 of the 115th Congress that said much the same thing. And it would the quote was, it would authorize veterans deemed mentally incompetent to buy firearms. Now, that did not make it into law. It passed the House and Fitzpatrick voted for it, but it never made it for a vote in the Senate. But it's the same situation where it's saying, even though we talk out of one side of our mouths to say that this is a mental health issue, they didn't take the basic steps to help enable people who are having mental health issues to be blocked from getting severe mental health issues to be blocked from getting guns. It's flabbergasting. It's so frustrating sometimes when you compare what the talking points are that they use to how they've actually voted.
Right. And let's be, the other part about this and why I think this is so important to really hit those points that you just hit about, look, we're voting, they voted to put those guns in people's hands who have been deemed kind of mentally unable to handle that gun. Right. And so that's what they just did. And we're not just talking about just a messaging bill, right, which basically, will go out there and make a stand about what they think about the world. We're talking about actually we're seeing the results of this, right? When you basically have people who have mental problems. And again, there is nobody on this podcast who listens to this podcast who is going to say that we don't need mental health, access to mental health care. Right? I mean,
right.
If it was
of course we do.
Right. If it was up to us, we're like, yeah. So who's against that? Nobody. Well, okay. So let's make sure that we have Medicare for all, so everybody has access to mental health care. Oh no, we can't do that. Right. But in here, when they do it, right, we're actually seeing people's lives being taken away. We're seeing kind of death and destruction on the other end of these kind of decisions. And of course, we saw, the most horrific examples of this, right? Again, over the past couple of weeks, first with, I don't want to take us too far off this issue, but, we saw an attempt, right? One of the first attempts that I can really see, a serious attempt to crack down on some of this white supremacy and the kind of these extremists who carried out that attack in Buffalo. And Fitzpatrick had an interesting approach to that too as well. You know
what? Actually, before you go in that direction,
go ahead.
You mind if I take us to one other gun issue? I'm so sorry.
No. That's fine. I'm like I said, I don't want to take us around too fast, but I'm just
Yeah, this is so important, I think, because it really shows who Fitzpatrick is. And it has to do with a vote he took in 2017 called the Concealed Carry Reciprocity Act.
Oh, right.
So concealed carry reciprocity, what that basically means is whatever state in the country has created a rule about concealed carry, carrying a gun under your coat, and whatever licensing they would have to go through, every other state in the country would have to accept. So it would be a race to the bottom. The idea that I think I wrote a tweet about it saying, if Texas decides to let ham sandwiches carry AR-15s, then Pennsylvania has to let that ham sandwich with an AR-15 into our state. That's what concealed carry reciprocity means. Now, a bill came out for a vote, and Fitzpatrick voted no on that bill, which the gun reform groups have lauded him for. Mm-hmm. But at the exact same time he voted no on that bill, he had a letter created to go out in response to folks who had questions about that vote. And I have to be honest, I have no idea how the Wallace campaign got their hands on this, but back in 2018, they got their hands on one of these letters. And he says, quote, under his letterhead, Fundamental to the commitment to the Second Amendment is my firm belief in the concept of reciprocity. And he goes on to say, advancing reciprocity is a critical step in protecting Second Amendment rights from the whims of partisan legislators and activist judges. And he wants to, quote, seize the opportunity to pass not the quickest, but the most effective consensus reciprocity measures possible, unquote. So it's not that he doesn't support concealed carry reciprocity. He does. He just didn't like that bill. And some students went after Parkland. They went up into his office to talk about this situation. And we have a tweet from 2018. Someone took video of it. I'm so happy that they did. And his chief of staff repeated that we have the video of it, of his chief of staff telling him, yes, Brian Fitzpatrick supports national concealed carry reciprocity. So it isn't just this draft letter that we have a handle on. So he voted one way, gets all this wonderful support from groups like Giffords and Moms Demand Action and all of the Bloomberg Everytown groups. And meanwhile, he's telling his supporters the exact opposite of the vote that he garnered all the benefits from.
And it's like he just it's like he sucks this stuff up. He waits until he gets those the happy thoughts and the endorsements, or the celebratory moments of saying, look, we have a Republican that's done this. He gets all those things, feeds them into his PR machine, and then goes and does the exact opposite, and basically kind of campaigns in the exact opposite direction, which brings us right, which is, again, we see the same identical pattern here after the Buffalo massacre, right?
Yep.
So walk us through what happened there. Yeah.
No, go for it.
No, walk us through what happened there. I want to, because this was crazy.
Okay, so we're talking about the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. So it's a bill that came up for a vote that Fitzpatrick had co-sponsored and was very proud and touted the fact that he, wanted to go after domestic terrorists, and he supported this bill, and that's why he was one of the Republicans who co-sponsored it. But when the bill came up for a vote, he voted no. Now, I'm going to read a little bit from his statement, but then I want to explain what this really means.
Right. So let's be clear. Let's just so we hit this really, really here. Brian Fitzpatrick co-sponsored this bill, right, to crack down on domestic terrorists, right, and especially in these kind of cases. And then when the bill comes up for a vote, he votes no.
Exactly.
A bill he co-sponsored. Okay.
This is one of the rare times that he actually put a statement up on his website. Because, we jokingly call him Silent Brian. He doesn't say anything about anything.
Well, he doesn't say stuff at all those town halls that he holds? Oh, wait.
Wait. I forgot. He doesn't have those. But, yeah, he very rarely offers statements. But this time he did. And his claims, so these are quotes from the statement that he issued on his website. So he says, Democratic leadership made changes to the Domestic Terrorism Prevention Act. And he claims that would, quote, give DOJ too much leeway in picking and choosing what it considers to constitute domestic terrorism. And then he goes on to, towards the end of the statement, say, Democratic leadership has pushed the bill away from its original bipartisan text and instead chose a single-party solution in an effort to appease the far left. They knew in advance that making changes to appease the squad, he has that in scare quotes, would cost them bipartisan support. End of the quotes from his statement. So I was like, what kind of changes could there have been? Let me go take a peek.
Hey, there's a question.
And let me go see. And for once, it was a short bill. It was only a 17-page bill. It wasn't one of those monstrous nightmare bills.
Right.
And the crux of the change is in the version of the bill that passed. It says, and this is a quote, the term domestic terrorism has the meaning given to the term in and then they give a citation, a section of the United States Code. Really simple, right? You'd think that government, government agencies using already established U.S. code to create a definition, because bills always have definitions in the beginning. But if you go back to Brian Fitzpatrick's, the version of the bill that he originally co-sponsored, it has this line, domestic terrorism has the meaning given in that code, which, it says that at the front. But it doesn't include, and then it has this long list of exceptions. And the exceptions are acts perpetrated by individuals associated or inspired by a foreign person or a foreign organization or a foreign terrorist organization or an organization designated under an executive order. Like, it goes through this like long list of exceptions to the point where you could imagine it could be interpreted to mean almost anything,
right.
Whereas the bill was actually simplified. He was objecting to the fact that they simplified it so that domestic terrorist means the same thing in U.S. code as it does in this bill.
So the reason why he would sponsor a bill like this to begin with is because, right? I mean, look, he's smart enough to know that he could vote for that bill, the original bill, but right, know that there was all this wiggle room that was built into it. So the effectiveness of the bill could have been completely diluted, if not made irrelevant, because whoever sitting in the executive office in kind of charge of the Justice Department would be able to interpret that stuff to kind of like not have to prosecute white supremacists, right?
Exactly. And the other piece of it too is, and it's something that, again, Ashley E. has, the Democratic congressional candidate for PA 01, she called out that he was doing the Fitzpatrick two-step because he can go to his moderate Democrats who in some cases do vote for him and say, you know, I came out against domestic terrorism and I co-sponsored a bill to take it on. And meanwhile, he can go to his far right red hat wearing folks and say, I voted against that horrible domestic terrorism bill. He gets to do both.
And he gets to demonize the squad. In other words, women of color primarily, right? Or people primarily.
And a few men of color too. Now the squad's a little bigger these days.
Yep, that's right. That's right. It's exactly. It keeps on growing for somehow.
I don't know why all these progressive folks are joining up.
Yeah, maybe some people, lots of folks getting sick and tired of kind of
status quo politics.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I mean, I think.
But yeah, it's really frustrating to see how, unfortunately, it is effective in some ways. He does get to use his messaging that way, unless folks are hearing from friends and neighbors and folks who are door knocking to tell them how it actually is. They are only going to hear the one piece of it that is the stream that they get from him. And it's very frustrating.
Right. You know, and I think that this all really ties in. I mean, once you start looking at like this as a political strategy on his part, you can see why he doesn't want to have town halls. He wants to play around with the kind of election integrity nonsense, right? And kind of find where he can kind of like not quite get behind expanding the rights to vote. Because, you know, really the only way he's able to pull this off is by, you know, making sure that the vast majority of people aren't paying close attention to politics and aren't paying close attention to his record. So it works against him to actually get people involved with the process and taking a close look at his record, because he does this kind of nonsense. And frankly, what kills me is that this is precisely the stuff that people like him say that everybody is sick of, right? That's why we need to just go and solve problems, right, in a rational way instead of the political nonsense, when he is one of the biggest perpetrators of this kind of talking out of both sides of your mouth.
Exactly. And I have to say, someone recently came to me and had a question about the Problem Solvers Caucus, because, you know, Brian Fitzpatrick, if he's in a room, he's going to say, you know, Problem Solvers Caucus probably once for every 3 minutes that he's present. I mean, like, he uses it a lot. So someone sent the link over to me to the caucus page and was like, oh my gosh, like these folks look so good. What are the talking points you use against them? And I was like, well, first of all, we call them the Problem Talkers Caucus because they haven't done anything. But when you go down the list of things that they say they've done, it's all, we issued this framework. We provided this, we have overwhelming support for reinvestment in this. We have a bipartisan proposal. We had a talking, you know, it's never, we got a bill passed.
Yeah,
we've done reports.
Yeah, and there's also like my favorite is like, we brought the donuts. No, just kidding.
Yeah, that is the equivalent of it. One of these, like when it talks on immigration, it literally says they travel together to tour a border facility and analyze the situation. They're in ongoing discussions to explore viable solutions. Literally, they are the Problem Talkers Caucus. They do nothing. They talk about it. They might take trips together, but they haven't solved anything.
It's about branding, and it's really just about branding.
Exactly. They don't do anything. But he gets to say that he's part of a group that solves problems, whether or not they actually do. The one thing that they did accomplish, and I'm using accomplish in the most derisive way possible, is they're really the reason that the Build Back Better bill got separated from the bipartisan infrastructure bill. That's what they accomplished this last term. They stopped us from getting Build Back Better passed.
Right. So anybody is kind of like, a little upset that, that child tax credit got taken away, a little upset that, our climate is going to hell in a handbasket and all the kind of most important climate legislation that was part of that bill are not going to be enacted. We just go down the list, right? I mean,
yeah.
And that all the stuff that was there to ensure like resiliency of our society, right? Both in the near and kind of long term is the very things that the Problem Solvers Caucus ensured would not happen.
Exactly.
So there you go.
They don't get anything done. They're funded by a group called No Labels. That's really just a bunch of billionaires who support the status quo.
Yep. Kelly DeJong just kind of got in chat and said, yep, we need to point out the two-step more. Said that's incredibly gross. I agree with you, Kelly, 100%.
Agreed.
100%. Right. Yep. And Emily gets in the Fitzy two-step. Yep.
Yeah. I'd also like to point out the fact that you mentioned election integrity. Yep. When Brian Fitzpatrick talks about election integrity, he's not talking about the same thing that we talk about when we're talking about it on the left side of the aisle. So I don't know about you, but when I think of election integrity, I'm thinking of things like making sure that partisans aren't in positions to decide upon election-related infrastructure issues, like that it's not, your person who went to January 6th and participated in the riot who's, now going to be a Secretary of State making decisions. Like that's part of what I think about in terms of election integrity. Yep. What Brian Fitzpatrick is talking about is voter ID. He's talking about signature match, which is something that as a disabled person that really upsets me because it will disenfranchise tons of people who have motor issues where their signatures may not match from day to day. He is talking about making it harder to vote.
Yep.
Not the election integrity that we think we're talking about.
Right. I 100. And here's the interesting thing. I served as the judge of elections in my ward for the first time ever this past election. Right.
Yeah, so, I heard you talk about it on a previous Raging Chicken. It sounded fascinating and also something I could never do because of the hours. But
I know
you for doing it.
It was extensive. But I have to say, and again, I've said this multiple times on the show, but when I think of election integrity, I think of the people that I worked with that day. Right. Mm-hmm. And I'll tell you, there were, I don't know, I couldn't tell you the party affiliation of everyone I worked with. I said, my guess would probably be they lean more on the Republican side just because that's where our ward is. Mm-hmm. But every single person that I worked with, right, their primary goal was to make sure that when somebody came in, that their vote was going to be cast. Right? Yep. Regardless of that. And so there were times that what that actually means, like a guy came in, right? He was an older guy who came in. He was unsure of what happened. He had a mail-in ballot, right? That got he decided he didn't want to vote in person, right? And he threw it out, right? And
right. And you have to bring it with you, don't you?
Right. But so what we did, right? And again, we had several of us that we can. This is how my goal was also. Let's several of us involved in this conversation to make sure that everybody hears what's going on. That we do. We called the Board of Elections while he was standing there. So we're kind of walking him through what's going on. And we made sure that there was the protocol, the procedure was there to make sure that he got his vote called, right? That he got vote cast. And so that he knew, right, that his vote was going someplace. He could trust that those of us who are on that side of thing all had his interest at heart. Yep. Right. And that we were going to make sure, and he was there every step of the way, and we had witnesses along the way. Right. That was it. And when I went and I dropped off my ballots, right, to the Board of Elections, how amazing those folks are. Right.
Seriously.
It just blew my mind. I mean, seriously, how incredible that was. And when I think those are the kind of things I think about election integrity, making sure that everybody who is going to be part of that process is going to, their primary goal is going to be making sure that everybody who walks into there is going to have their ballot counted. Right. And making sure that that's what you want.
Right. That's what we want, but it's not what he wants.
Correct. 100%. It's exactly the opposite. It's finding underhanded ways to disenfranchise voters.
And of course, at the same time that he's now, Granted, I'm not watching network TV too much, but I'll admit I watch Roku TV a lot, and he had that network like papered, or not papered, but covered with ads. Every time there was a commercial break, there was 30 seconds about him during the primary. That election integrity ad that he did was on frequently, where he claimed the radical left kicks and screams at the idea of voter ID, and he goes on and on about it. And so, like, at the same time he's doing that, he's also employing people on his staff who turn out to be political sign thieves and ballot harvesters. So how much is he committed to election integrity if he's willing to associate with that sort of folk and pay them?
Right, exactly. 100%. And I think that, and I was like thinking about that. This is like, again, another way of looking at his two-stepping is basically looking at the ways that he gaslights people and to kind of like kind of misdirecting them to what he's actually doing. And this was one of the perfect examples of this kind of election integrity kind of gaslighting going on and making it sound all good, right? When really what he was doing is exactly the opposite of what the
right.
says.
And the other thing about that too is to remember that the Republican Party on a national, from national on up, they specifically tasked him to create that election integrity quote unquote election integrity package. Yep. Like, they're trading on his perception as like, oh, he's the moderate bipartisan guy. We'll have him put this out, even though it is as far right a set of principles as you could find. I mean, again, signature match just drives me bonkers, but voter ID too. Like, there's no acknowledgement of how hard it is for someone who doesn't have an ID to get one in many places in the country. They would be disenfranchised. There are people who don't have birth certificates anymore. Exactly. They would be disenfranchised.
Exactly. So let me say one thing before, because I know we're running up on time here, but one thing that I want to kind of go back to is like, so, and this is kind of a way of kind of buttoning up his little thing, is that, he keeps on touting this line, right? He's the most bipartisan lawmaker that's out there, right? Mm-hmm. How is it possible, or what the hell does that even mean? Right. When we're talking about this,
drives me wild. When this gets explained to you, I think it will drive you wild too. When he claims that he's received the most bipartisan lawmaker award, it's given out by a group called the Lugar Institute, I believe. Mm-hmm. All that it judges is how many bills a lawmaker has co-sponsored that are from a person of the other party. That's all it is. It's signing one's name on a piece of paper. I was going through those bills today because I was doing something related to gun policy. It wasn't just gun votes, but I wanted to see what he was doing with co-sponsoring bills. And like, he's co-sponsored the Kombucha Act, which is a bill that exempts people who make kombucha from being, qualified as brewsters. The way that
beverages, right? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's like anything. He co-sponsors bridge naming and post office naming. Lots of little fixes. I'm not saying that those little fixes aren't important, but he will put his name on anything. There are over 12,000 bills that have been introduced so far this session. He's co-sponsored over 1,000 of them. He just co-sponsors everything. So, like, all that would need to happen is for a Democratic lawmaker to start co-sponsoring every Republican bill, and then suddenly they could be the most bipartisan lawmaker. It's just about signing his name. And who knows? Who knows if he's even the one approving it? It could just be that there's someone in his staff who's tasked to, like, review a bill and make sure it doesn't have a line about killing puppies in it somewhere, and he'll sign it. Like, we shouldn't give people awards for signing their name once they're past second grade. That's my feeling. But Brian Fitzpatrick not only gets it, but he talks about it all the time. Dude can sign his name.
No, there you go. He can sign his name. And I think, again, this underscores what this is a political strategy. Is like the reason why he touts it so much. Look, once you know the rules of any kind of award like this, you can game the rules if that's the kind of person you are. Right. If you're actually more interested in kind of getting the name and the title and doing the superficial work, then you can kind of find your ways to game the system. And that's what he's doing.
And let's be real. Like, if we're being fair about it, the Democrats who are getting him to co-sponsor are gaming the system a little bit, too, because it looks good for them to be able to say, I have my bipartisan bill on, renaming whatever this street is, whatever the name is, it doesn't really matter, but like, they get some benefit out of their out of their voters by being able to say my bill's bipartisan. Fitzpatrick gets his award for it. It's a, one hand washes the other situation. But I wouldn't be surprised if like every single Democratic lawmaker knows, like, if you just want a bill to be bipartisan,
Totally.
just ask Brian Fitzpatrick. He'll sign anything.
Right. He'll sign anything. Right. I'm sure. Well, look, this is precisely why we have to be paying attention to things a little bit differently now. And I think that I'm going to be hopeful here. And I'm going to say there has been enough like horror over the past couple months that people are at a point where we're looking to kind of dig in and kind of pay more closely attention here. And I think that one of the reasons why I'm so glad you're on tonight is because I do think these are some of the issues, and not just the issues that we should be paying attention, but how we need to be thinking about them as we're preparing for the midterm elections. And all those folks, as we're getting out there talking to people about why they should not be supporting Brian Fitzpatrick, why they should be out there and kind of campaigning for people who really support the values that we hold here. Like, again, making sure that we're kind of like defending women's reproductive freedom, right? Defending kind of the right to an abortion, like making sure we're having real meaningful kind of gun reform and gun control. Make sure, I mean, if it was up to me, ban assault weapons, period, right? I mean, let's go, the list can go on and on and on, right?
Yeah.
But making sure that we're paying attention, not just to the nice superficial dressing that's put on here, but to the content and to the specific things that people like Brian Fitzpatrick do to divert our attention away from what the real record is. So, this is where we got to be. So, Kierstyn, before I let you go tonight, is there anything that you've kind of closing words, things you want to plug, things that people should be paying attention to?
Thank you for that offer. So I do want to do a couple of plugs. The first is to say that right now in this season, if any of these topics that we've discussed worries you at all, and I hope that they do, you really need to be going to the social media profile or the website for Ashley E. Haas. I'm not saying this in terms of donating money because I'm an indivisible person and we want to say get money out of politics. If you can, great. But really, campaigns need your time. They need time and effort. A lot of the things they spend money on help bring in more volunteers to help them. And that's really what they need. So please, if you have any time to give, consider giving it to her campaign. Second thing is, please visit any of the Indivisible Bucks County or Indivisible Lambertville New Hope social media profiles. Both of the organizations are on Facebook. We are on Twitter. We can find ways for you to give of your time to help, move us towards a more progressive, inclusive, equitable future. And the last thing is particularly related to what happened these past 2 weeks related to gun violence. If you are as horrified or filled with rage or frustration about this issue, I would say that Indivisible Lambertville New Hope is having an event, a Zoom event on Thursday night. I believe it's called like Channeling Rage into Action, something along those lines.
Channel your fury.
There you go. Channel your fury. They have such a way with words. They're wonderful. And I would encourage you to sign up for it. I think Kevin's putting the link to it in the notes.
Yep.
If you go to their website, which I believe is just ILNH, you know what?
Indivisiblelnh.com. I put that link directly in the chat right now. It is also in the show notes. And I also put the direct link to the Zoom event in today's chat right now as well.
Wonderful. So I think if I'm not going to be there myself, I know that I'm going to have a statement about a canvassing opportunity that may come up. They are a wonderful group who are going to be able to point you towards actions and resources so that you can do things as opposed to just fretting about this issue. Because we always go back to those Nancy Pelosi words. We do not agonize, we organize. And we can organize our way out of this if we elect enough lawmakers who agree with us that this is an action that needs to be worked on. So that's what I gotta say. Ashley E. Haas, check out Indivisible, and in particular this Indivisible Lambertville New Hope event on Thursday.
Well, 100%. Well, Kierstyn, I can't think of a better place to close out on that kind of note of hope. Thank you so much for kind of taking the time out tonight and joining us here.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure.
Oh, you got it. Hey, everybody. And thank you for joining us tonight. And I wanted to thank all of our patrons and all of our members and all of our supporters who've been out there. Thanks to our Twitter warriors who are out there, are always out sharing our show. Make sure that you're kind of passing on the word. And look, if you've got suggestions about folks that you think that we should have on the show, you can shoot me an email at ragingchicken@gmail.com, or it's ragingchickenpress@gmail.com. We're going to be updating that kind of contact information. I'm going to have a whole new launch launched this summer, which I'm really excited to tell you about kind of in a couple of weeks. But if you're looking for ways of, you have ideas of people that are kind of you want to have on the show, do let me know. I'd really appreciate that. And look, if you're looking for a way to kind of making sure that you're kind of investing in the organizing on the ground here, making sure that you are, our money that we're going to be kind of putting up are going to go directly into kind of helping out kind of local candidates, helping out progressive organizing. You can always head on over to ragingchicken at levelfield.net. That'll help our little community-based pack over here. But most of all, what you can do is you can help become a member of this show, help out the show by going to patreon.com/rcpress and become a patron today. Kierstyn, thank you so much for kind of joining me. And we'll see you on the flip side. We'll all be out there organizing for this summer of rage and hope. We'll take it easy. All right, everybody. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken. I should be playing music right now. Here we go. There it is. Tech has not failed me yet. Well, kind of. We'll see. Anyways, we'll be checking us out on Friday for our Friday Politics Roundup. We'll have more info on what's happening on next week's Altitude Live. See ya!